Good afternoon, everybody. I think grandfather must really be controlling the agenda. It's exactly 1 o'clock, and we're able to start our honoring of the July 21st, 2020 solstice, and many other things. And I have smudged myself because, as you know, grandfather always liked to start all his meetings and his gathering and his events by reminding us of the spirit of the Creator and the other energies that guide our lives in this world. And I'm now going to put my smudge bowl aside and tell you how, well, one of grandfather's buddies was making sure I was going to be on time. Bob Mather just called me a second ago to show that he's in uniform, as indeed I am. And Bob, since you're already online, maybe you can make a comment so that I can see that folk can hear me okay. Um, I'll just wait till I see whether I get a good response from someone to know whether you can hear me, whether you can see me, what you can see. I don't know. Himani, are you there? Okay. Well, well, that's really, really a good start. And Himani, can you tell me what you can see on the screen? I imagine since you can hear me, I don't have to type out the message, right? Aha, Tim Thompson. Um, and I saw somebody else. Oh, Carmen. But there is a computer blocking your image. Um, does that work better? Does that work better? Uh, hmm. How is that? Okay. Okay, so let me see how I can shrink it. Does that help better? But still more of your Facebook screen than of me. Yes, because you know how shy I am, you guys. Uh, and look what things COVID makes us do to keep some sense of our community going. Um, I don't think I am getting to um, shrink live screen, but I would also need it there so that I can keep seeing you guys and your comments. Okay, Tim says it's perfect, and I'm going to go with that. And I can also make myself larger. And is that better? How's that? Oh, I have to remember to, uh, you see. Okay, Himani, you'll have to keep reassuring me throughout. Yeah, no, I can't. Sorry, Jane, I can't turn off the other pages because then I'll never be able to find them again. And we're pretty well going to go to that very soon. But just remind me, people, to switch back to my face when I'm talking to you. And there you go. Actually, I've tried to keep it simple this time, uh, only to present you with a massive PowerPoint presentation that I created this morning. Felix, yes, you are indeed on Circle of All Nations, celebration of Indigenous Peoples Day, amongst other things. This is the work of Grandfather William Commander that we're celebrating. We're also acknowledging the solstice, the eclipse. Okay, so thank you, Himani. I think we're doing okay. And I'm going to tell you then, you guys who are already part of our show, that, it's with some trepidation that I approach the prayer of the Circle of All Nations event. As most of the people who've been to Grandfather's gatherings over the years know, and most people who've invited him to open meetings or blessed events know, he likes to smudge, generally with sage, generally by drawing a circle of protection, a circle of truth speaking around people with the sacred herb, one of the four sacred herbs. He usually used sage, but of course, you also know how important tobacco is, how important cedar is, and how important sweetgrass is. So, as I'm remembering sweetgrass, I'm wanting to acknowledge the many, many pipe ceremonies that Grandfather Commander and many other elders hosted at Victoria Island and in other places. And I'm remembering Elder Peter DeConti, Shomus Dominic Rankin, Abuela Margarita, who's a special part of the energies of today because she always reminded us that we're cosmic beings. Late elders like Lillian Parawanakwat. The sweetgrass, of course, reminded me of Big Bear. Ron, Big Bear used to bring sweetgrass braids to the pipe ceremonies at Victoria Island. And he did much teaching with that particular sacred medicine till it became too difficult to harvest anymore. But thank you, Ron. You were also a firekeeper with Ron Bernard when Grandfather sought to protect the South March Islands, and we remember all the efforts, all the prayers of the people. I'm remembering, of course, our twins, regulars at our gathering. I think at our pipe ceremonies on Victoria Island, there'd be quite often Ron Barnes, Ray Sundstrom. Women would do water ceremony, honoring the water. And over the course of the afternoon, perhaps some of our folk will share with us. But in any case, at this point, I'm saying welcome to everybody. I did like the sage as our opening prayer, but as most of you folk will know, Grandfather always takes a hand in his events. And just while I was poking around yesterday, he presented me with all the key papers for today, including a prayer. And so I'm going to start out by reading this one to you. And actually, I shall read it, and then I'll go on to the PowerPoint, so you'll see less of my face, but you'll see our actual presentation. So, the words are, "Oh, great spirit, whose voice I hear in the winds, and whose breath gives life to the universe, hear me. I am your child of light. I need to know your love. Let me walk in beauty and make my eyes ever behold the red and the purple sunset. Make my hands respect the things you have made and my ears sharp to hear your voice. Make me wise so that I may understand the things you are teaching me. Let me learn the lessons you are hiding under every rock and leaf I seek strength, not to be greater than my brother, but to overcome my greatest enemy, myself. Make me always ready to come to you with clean hands and straight eyes. So when light fades as the fading sunset, my spirit may come to you without shame. So that here is the prayer that I think Grandfather Commander wants us all to be embracing today. And I'm glad to have had the opportunity to share it. I may share it again later as I see more people joining our event when it actually presents itself on our PowerPoint. But I'll just take a minute now to, gee whiz, I think I should be able to like all these lovely messages already. And so let me just do that. Well, the first one I loved was actually Circle of All Nations' own message. And Himani, I'll take a minute to introduce her. Himani is one of the new students who is now getting to know about Grandfather Commander. And a little later, you'll see how quickly, in barely a month, she's learned some key things about the way he thinks, and she articulates some of his thinking in a very, very impressive way. Thank you, Himani. Tim Thompson, hello. Carmen, I saw you up there, and I hope I'm looking better to you now, not blocking the image. Jane Lindsay, hello. You know, you guys, when you write any messages, could you also just write where you're from so we keep track of your locations? That would be so wonderful. Hi, Ani. Ani Kai Ashia. Going down. Felix, yes, welcome. Justin, happy to be here. Yes, indeed, it's our special solstice. Hey, Jason Pine, good to see you. Hey, Letty, coming all the way. Are you still in Spain? Good to see you here. Okay, guys, I'm now going to move to our PowerPoint, in part by shrinking myself. And here we go. So, Himani, can you still reassure me that we're doing okay? Hi, Sandy. Glad you're able to make it. Okay, great. Himani, can you see the PowerPoint okay now? Or anybody can actually respond. And I shall carry on. So this is a very special Circle of All Nations Solstice 2020 online Facebook gathering honoring Grandfather Commander's work. Yes, Himani assures me that you can see me. So this is, let me go back. This is a Circle of All Nations educational event to build bridges between grassroots, institutions, and academia. And I've included some details about myself, in part because most folk will recall they really didn't know very much about me in the context of my work with Grandfather Commander. And I just generally didn't use much more of an identifier than coordinator of Circle of All Nations. But at this particular time, we're studying Grandfather Commander's knowledge and wisdom and looking to input that into the world of academia. As you know, he received 2 honorary degrees from the University of Ottawa and the University of Quebec Outaouais. He was also acknowledged as a leader at St. Paul's University in the National Capital Region, and I completed my thesis on grandfather at Carleton University. I'm right now doing further postdoctoral research on his work so that we can leave a full record of his thinking and share what his thinking has meant to many of us. And so the credentials help me bridge between us, the Circle of Four Nations grassroots community, and also Grandfather Commander within the academic world. And we're hoping as more people begin to understand the complexities and the bridging of his thinking, that we will move towards better ideas and better thinking to impact on a world that is in huge, huge crisis. So we're doing a Facebook Live online gathering. It's our second, and for us, it's a pretty special moment because though we aren't able to see all of you as we did during our gatherings, we can actually still invite anybody who's interested in our work to join us, to join Grandfather Circle. And we can reach folk from wherever they happen to be, all over the world. So here we've invited folk to join us for a special storytelling session, to add to the chat and to share your memories and passions. And of course, folk, please use the chat bar to add your comments. Fran Denis, I noticed you sent some message a few seconds ago, but now I hope you can figure out how to actually write something in the sidebar. Fran Denis, as some of you who came to our gatherings would know, used to manage our communications booth, and she ensured that we were both bilingual and open to everybody and informative. Merci beaucoup, Francine. Francine has just actually joined Facebook, and she gives me a lot of support by commenting on the kinds of posts we share to create global thinking around the issues that we think Grandfather Commander and other circle colleagues believe is important. So please add to the chat, and you know what, Facebook records all of this, and so we'll be able to keep your messages, keeping our work moving. So today we're honoring summer solstice, the solar eclipse, the legacy of Grandfather William Commander. We're honoring National Indigenous Peoples Day, Father's Day, and Grandfather's Day. My own father died when I was here in Canada. I was pretty young. I never did get back to South Africa for his funeral. He left my younger sisters and my mother, alone. So Father's Day is a poignant moment for all of us. But we try to balance off all the great things we've learned from him. I know I was the oldest, so I had a jolly good shot at learning lots from my father. And I also know that Father's Day is not always easy for everybody, since I myself have inherited children, adopted children, multi-race children. This kind of a celebration also can bring thoughts of angst to many folk. And we're hoping that ultimately the healing energy that Grandfather Commander shared with as many folk as he came into contact with will help and support other folk. I wanted to say, I don't think I have this photo up here, but I noticed a photo of Grandfather Commander a little while ago. It's probably in Karen's video. And it included a ring, and it was a ring that he received from a guy from Akwesasne who had dealt with leprosy, who was a leper, but I guess maybe in some stage of cure, healing. And he gave Grandfather that ring, and he wore it all the time, remembering everybody, I guess. Okay, so, and I want to also just make a point about this. So while Facebook gets a bad rap for many things, we ourselves want to express our gratitude to be able to do this global online gathering and learn and share ourselves on our several safe Facebook pages. We've been doing this since 2009. Grandfather's been a presence on Facebook pretty well from its inception. I said I'm studying him, and at school, thanks really to the huge support of my supervisor, Dr. Fraser Taylor, who's the director of the Geomatics and Cartographic Research Center within the Department of Geography, I've been able to support, to complete Grandfather Commander's pieces. And now I'm working to create a cyber cartographic digital atlas. This is a domain of storytelling online on maps that Dr. Taylor initiated and developed with his team at the Geomatics and Cartographic Research Center, a team which has created the innovative Nunalink platform to do this digital storytelling. So in creating a Commander Circle of All Nations atlas, I hope to leave a living archive record of Grandfather Commander's work. But I also say that our work is also cybernetic. I call Grandfather the cyber elder. And if you really look for the roots of the meaning of that word cyber, you'll find that it actually talks about steering, guiding. And together with his identity as a canoe person, a person on the move, this notion of guiding and steering and directing our work is also very much a part of the grandfather outreach. And social media, and especially Facebook, enables us to present time-based stories. So with our digital atlas, we present place-based stories. But with our Circle of All Nations pages, thanks in huge, huge parts to the amazing gang of people, friends we have on Facebook who present such critical, important issues for us to explore. We're on top of world's news way faster than most of the news broadcasts that Grandfather used to patiently be watching. And in this process, it's overwhelming how much we know about the globe, about climate change, about the environmental crises, about the violence, the brutalities, the creativity, etc. And that is moving at such a pace that we can barely digest it and move on, because life is always about the journey. And this, in fact, is what our gathering here is about. So we consider Facebook supporting our cyber work and studies. So I have already, in fact, read this opening prayer to you. And Felix is asking, oh, to explain who Grandfather Commander is. Okay, so we've got an absolute newcomer joining our gang, and we're going to get exactly to that next. I believe the PowerPoint will remain, so folk who have not seen that prayer can join up with that later. Okay. William Commander, I see you're helping there, Jamie. Terrific. Even Wiki has him. We call Grandfather Commander the .com elder. And he's very much part of the cyber world. As I was saying yesterday, I saw suddenly this most loved photo that I had posted in 2012 on Facebook. And it was actually of Grandfather during his last visit to Victoria Island. And, you know, I mean, between wanting to cry because it was a memory of when he was dying, I also wanted to laugh because I felt like, my goodness gracious me, he's controlling the Facebook algorithms. So he is the Indigenous elder, the carrier of the sacred wampum belts of Algonquin ancestry, belts that were carried by his own great-great-grandfather, Luke Antoine Paknawati. Grandfather described his belts as living belts. In this image, he is carrying the three-figure wampum belt, where he says the Indian in the center drew together the hands of the newcomers, in those days the French and the English, drew them together in friendship because the Indian was aware of the wars and violence that had impacted their relationships over countless centuries, and agreed to share the values and the grand natural resources of his continent. Now, this bet goes back to just before the turn of the 1700s, turn into the 1700s. And at that time, there was no Canada, there was no United States, there was no border dividing Turtle Island. And the people on the East Coast, the Algonquian people of the Eastern Seaboard, were the first people to actually be welcoming the newcomers. So grandfather considered this commitment of the ancestors of North America, the indigenous ancestors of North America, encrypted in the wampum belt that his great-great-grandfather had carried, was a responsibility that he too had to maintain. So he always held out his hand in friendship to all newcomers. Later, beyond the earliest settlers, there became the new immigrants arrived to be part of the groupings. The agreement to share the values and grand natural resources in equitable shares was a sacred agreement, and this was signified by the symbol of the cross. But there were many, many times that grandfather wondered about how well the indigenous, the native in the center was interpreted in the manifestation of the commitment. And of course, when we see some of the tragedies that impact the lives of indigenous peoples here in Canada, but also in the States, we know he was right to worry deeply about that. This poster is when he received, the photograph in the poster on the other side comes from when he received the Lifetime Achievement Award from the then known as National Aboriginal Achievement Awards. And we have a quotation that is really very important to us and to him, that we must come together with one heart, one mind, one love, and one determination to create a circle of all nations, a culture of peace. Nous devons nous unir avec un seul cœur, un seul ami et une volonté pour créer un cercle de toutes les nations et un cercle de paix. So, Felix, grandfather commander, was also a kindergarten dropout. And in 2004, he did some teachings over a 2-week period. I translated it into that book over there at the bottom. I called it Learning from a Kindergarten Dropout. And right now I'm teaching a course with some people. Sandy, I see, is one of the folk who's joined us today. And we're translating some of the messages from that kindergarten dropout wisdom book into the academic world. And I've included with the invitation to this event some of the core principles we'd identified back then in 2005. And you'll see that really these are the kinds of things that we all over the world need to be wrapping our heads around very seriously, given the crisis that we're all facing. And just as I said, my Professor Fraser Taylor reminded me to, ensure that I mark copyright on my materials so people will properly acknowledge William Commander and myself when they use us and quote us, because actually that hasn't been the case over the last 20 or 30 or maybe 100 years. Actually, one time when I said to grandfather, wow, you know, they're just taking all our stuff. He said to me, well, Romola, if they start to think like us, then maybe it's worth it. But at any rate, I want to say we're sharing this for folk to enhance your own growth, your own development, your own personal thinking, impact on how you do your work, how you live your lives, how you engage with your communities. If you also, you know, want to use our materials to support your own businesses and things like that, I think you might want to consider purchasing a copy of our Circle of All Nations book and our other materials through Turtle Lodge Trading Post. Karen is the person who actually did the graphic design for our book. All of our work over the last 20 years or more has been totally unfunded, including our book. And so we're only able to go at whatever pace we can with our own efforts. However, should people support our books and things like that, it enables us to return the support to people who volunteer a lot of time to make Circle of All Nations work. The next photo is a picture when grandfather did the opening prayer for the Landmines Treaty. That, as some of you will know, was the Princess Diana initiative. And of course, that's our prayer to end violence and war. Their grandfather commander is doing a prayer at Victoria Island at one of the black holes, the one on the Victoria Island side. And there he is when he received his honorary doctorate degree from the University of Ottawa. I say we wrote the book about the Kindergarten Dropout, and then University of Ottawa presented him with his degree. Was quite a special moment. He actually delivered the convocation speech as well, convocation remarks, and in the after event party, it was actually grandfather commander's party. And it was kind of neat. A few years ago on Parliament Hill, I met a student who graduated the same time as grandfather. And, you know, 10 years later, he was remembering what a special moment that was. Now, I mentioned Himani. She's one of the students who's working with us right now at Carleton University, learning to understand grandfather's work. The other is April, who's been our tech person, helping us to figure out how to do this online communications and sharing with you guys. So yeah, the Kindergarten Dropout is reaching students. His work is about, our work is about recognizing, acknowledging Indigenous spirit and knowledge. The first image is actually of a totem pole that grandfather created and presented on the land in 1967 in Eganville, Ontario, and I photographed it last year. So the pole is still standing, very, very special. It was a moment when grandfather hosted the first international gathering to welcome newcomers to his land, to reaffirm the message of the three-figure wampum belt. And this was, as you'll recall, the moment where Canada was celebrating its 100th birthday. Political as always, grandfather both wanted to build bridges, wanted to acknowledge international in terms of the connection with Canada and the United States. And it was also a healing gathering focused on Mother Earth, on ancient limestone rocks of the Ordovician period. Was the first international multicultural gathering in Eganville and Canada's 100th birthday message. Then we come to the next photo, which is about the Sunbow 5 walk. And I'll talk a little bit more about that later. But in fact, this is 25 years since the Sunbow 5 walk, and we're celebrating that anniversary today. Finally, there's the peace poster that we presented for the Millennium Peace Gathering and the United Nations Day for the declaration of a decade for a culture of peace. Who else is William Commander? He's a carrier of sacred wampum heritage. He's a renowned birch bark canoe maker and craftsman. He's a political Algonquin leader, elder, chief of the North American Indian Nations government. He's the founder of the Circle of All Nations, a global eco-peace community dedicated to advancing environmental stewardship and racial harmony. He's an officer of the Order of Canada and recipient of 2 honorary doctorate degrees. He was actually nominated for the Order of Canada, but they decided to appoint him officer. And that is about presenting honors for those who desire a better country. And indeed, we continue some of this work because, in fact, William did endlessly desire a better country. The University of Ottawa Chancellor Michael Jean created Commander Hall in recognition of his relevance to academic knowledge in 2014. And a couple of years ago, the Canadian History Museum installed a panel and message from William Commander, I guess indicative of the fact that they recognized too that he was a historical figure. Yeah, that's a better way to do this. Okay, so in part, our event today is cosmogeography. This is June 21st, and just before I get into that, I'm going to just have a quick look at the chat line to see that everybody is, oh, I see Stephanie's on board. Hi, Stephanie. LV. Okay, so that was sort of like a pause because I'm going to the next paragraph. And the next paragraph is our cosmogeography. And over here, geography is always trying to understand time and space, but perhaps been more preoccupied by space because so much of geography in the conventional way evolved with the movement of people and also with the colonization of new lands. But Indigenous peoples retained a knowledge of the cosmos in their understanding of people on Earth. And so in this view, this lens into life, the solstice, the eclipse, the sorry, I forgot about the equinox. I should have had that in that clip over there. The solstice, the equinox, the eclipse, and the cosmic law of nature were things that guided people's way of life. I wanted to mention in particular Grandpa Alonzo on June 21st. Over the years of colonization, many Native people, many Indigenous peoples were removed forcibly from their heritage, their knowledge, their culture, their language, their land, all of which contributed to a way of knowing, a way of understanding. One person in contemporary recollection who retained amazing knowledge of the stars, the fire, the water, the movement of water, the change of the seasons, was William Commander's father, Grandpa Alonzo. And he, in some way, pointed out that this day, the day when of June 21st, 22nd, 20th, usually the solstice arrives somewhere in that 3-day period. Sometimes it's difficult for them to pin exactly which day is the absolute moment when we have the longest day, and we're in North America, closest to the sun, or when we have the shortest day, and folk in other parts of the world, South Africa, for example, are close to the sun in December. But he acknowledged something about June 21st, and we had Dr. William Sullivan and Jim Farnham come to visit us from Massachusetts. Uh, Bill Sullivan had written a book about the secret of the Incas. And in this process, he did all sorts of amazing research and calendar research to figure out the precision with which the ancient people understood the movement, not just of the moon, the sun, the planets, even though that is all mighty, mighty important, but even as the constellations moved, when Saturn moved, when, well, now I suppose the age of Aquarius is dawning, and through that he could see how in the mythology, how in the stories, indigenous peoples coded their knowledge. Grandpa Alonzo, um, in my other stories about William Commander, I tell many other stories about him, but one I want to mention, because of course we're all concerned about extreme weather and stuff like that, is that he predicts in 1974, he predicts the 1974 floods down the Gatineau during the fall of 1973. He dies in March 1974. The floods came in June of a few months after he had died. And in fact, grandfather was in a canoe at the campsite where our gatherings used to be hosted at Burnaby Lake um, during that very summer. So somehow in the fall, from his configuration of time, space, movement, uh, uh, he was like an incredible mathematician, even though we don't necessarily recognize that capacity amongst indigenous people so well as we ought to. But out of his calculations, he was able to tell in so many months a flood is coming. Jamie, I noticed that you were online and you recall how we were talking about the tree cutting at Baskettown in 2014, and how later it was reflected in the flooding at Hudson Oka in 2019. And now that was being explored by you and the regional municipality people and being documented. So those were some of the ways that Grandpa Alonzo understood nature, weather, climate, and things like that. But what is interesting about it also is that in 2017, when we had these huge floods of the Ottawa River, when, as somebody said to me, 8 rivers returned to their beds in Quebec, both Tommy DeWashi, William's grandson, son-in-law, and Daisy, his sister Judy's daughter, immediately called me and reflected about grandfather's way of knowing and about his prediction of the 1974 floods. You know, grandfather used to host these gatherings in Maniwaki in the 70s, and he and his friends, Bim and Logan being one of them, built this massive log cabin on the lake over there. And in this flood, it went floating down the river. Of course, this is partly because of the manipulations of Hydro-Quebec, but there was no compensation for what the indigenous peoples lost during that time. Certainly not for grandfather's cabin. Um, and I must always mention grandfather Margarita when I talk cosmic, because she is really, really the one who kept reminding us that we are cosmic beings. And in fact, I think the science museums in Washington, D.C. must be listening to her, because when my sister Zenia and I visited them in recent years, we discovered that they now too confirm, like many indigenous peoples, like the Dogon tribe in Africa, that we are star people. We actually have stardust in us. On the top over there, I picked up a Facebook posting of the eclipse. So today is a special annular eclipse, solar eclipse that was captured in New Zealand, the early part of our day. Okay, I'll pause before I get into the next paragraph. Joy Newman, great to see you up here. Joy and Keith Newman from the Initiatives of Change, new grandfather commander. Oh gosh, decades ago. I was just reminding Joy a few months ago that grandfather commander and Keith Newman shared a room in Co at a gathering in Switzerland. And grandfather remembered and told me about how Keith snores. This was an interesting peace building, racial integration effort of Initiatives of Change in the old days called moral rearmament. And grandfather commander smoked pipe in that room. And guess who else was there with him? The chief, Joe Norton, was also there as part of that event. And he smoked pipe with grandfather commander, gosh, probably 80s? I don't know. Something like that. And of course, Evelyn DeWashi, Williams' daughter, and her sister-in-law, Josie White Duck, also went and joined the folk in Switzerland in the past. Thanks for helping me remember that that tidbit. Hi, Stephanie has sent us something here, a CBC gem to help us remember grandfather. Oh no, I hope I haven't screwed that up. Excuse me. Okay, so I shall now go on to, well, I see Jamie has mentioned that Mary Commander was from Basketong, Mishomis area. And in that context, you know, when they in 1924 flooded Basketong in order to create the Basketong Reservoir, they just pretty well chased away the ancestors of Mary's family and others actually. Grandpa Smith got no compensation for his home and his land. They were just pretty well flooded out of their home. Then they ended up moving to Maniwaki, Kirigan Zibi, in those days River Desert, the first reserve created in Canada, what was originally meant to be a sanctuary for the preservation of Indigenous culture, language, and this was accomplished by grandfather Pakanawati, great-great-grandfather Pakanawati. In fact, it ended up becoming really rather a place of confinement for many. But yeah, so when Charlie Smith and other folk joined the Native people on the reserve, there were tensions in the relationships initially, and of course some of that still kind of continues in terms of the artificial divisions that colonization and the creation of Canada imposed on the relationships and lives of Indigenous peoples. And of course, they're still bearing the burden of that. So now let's get on to National Indigenous Peoples Day. In 1945, North American Indian Nation government architect Joe Seaweed declared June 21st to be Indian Day. William has told me this many, many times. And of course, consistent with what Grandpa Alonzo affirmed about June 21st, that was the most important day to the people of North America, because in fact, everything about life in North America would surely have been dependent on the sun. The people arrived here after the retreat of the glaciers, the last glaciers, between 17,000 and 9,000 years ago. 12,000 years ago, but then after that, the retreat of the Champlain Sea gave people space to occupy. But of course, in this process, then, respect for the sun was of tremendous importance. And um, many of our Massachusetts colleagues have been tracking the knowledge of Indigenous peoples in the calendar rock placements all over the Northeast coast. Bill Sullivan first alerted us to this, and grandfather and I watched many documentaries about the hidden landscapes of North America. Right now on Facebook, I have several new friends who are posting or uncovering amazing rock sites that reveal the calendar knowledge of the people of the American Northeast. Historically, of course, we've paid more attention to the indigenous peoples of the Southwest, and it's also permitted us to forget our colonial oppression on the East Coast. But more and more of that reality is becoming known. But of course, already some of this was known to Jules Siwi. He himself actually worked in New York at one stage, at the time really when the United Nations were beginning to create their own presence in what he considered his indigenous land. And he also noted the huge oppression, poverty, struggles of indigenous peoples post the Great Depression, then with the oppression of the Indian agents. And he then began to develop this sense of what was indigenous, what was native, what was Indian. So many years later, June 21st has become known as National Aboriginal Day. But before I get to that, let me just go to my other message on the PowerPoint. May became Aboriginal Awareness Week. This began in the 1993, around about that period, when the United Nations, after the first conference of Indigenous peoples, the Cry of the Earth conference, after that, the United Nations declared a decade for the culture of Indigenous peoples. And the May became a month that government departments in Canada, consistent with the Charter of Rights, etc., would what was I saying? Consistent with the Charter of Rights and stuff like that, developed a month to be associated with Victoria Day and the relationship with the Crown as sovereign peoples. As a matter of fact, the association of May with Indigenous and the Crown goes back even earlier than that. But in the 90s, that's when Government of Canada formalized some of those patterns, those relationships. This, of course, because originally, of course, Canada comprised the two original solitudes, the ones of the French and the English. But when newcomers came in after the Second World War, there needed to be a way to embrace the diversity. So Canada became multicultural beyond just being affirming itself as bilingual. But then the Indigenous question was unresolved. And actually, I think it still remains unresolved because when Canada brought home the Charter, it was supposed to host 4 conferences of Indigenous peoples. And I don't believe all 4 of them have yet been held. Grandfather Commander was at one in 1987. And he took his wampum belts there. So his wampum are part of our history. And but his concern even then was about the environment. And he could already see the kind of devastation, the loss of species, the extreme weather, the climate change, the spread of contagious diseases such as we're dealing with now. He could already see that coming, and he said to the leadership then, you know, we depend on you to clean this up before the end of time. It's so ironic that for some of us, we wonder what time we're living in right now. Anyway, yeah, so May used to be associated with Aboriginal awareness, but in 1996, this is now post Oka, the Governor General Romola declared National Aboriginal Day. Now, this was really has to be also understood in context, because first you've had the justice inquiries, the Donald Marshall Jr. Justice Inquiry in Nova Scotia, the Manitoba inquiry into the death and killing of Betty Helen Osborne. You had also the Oka crisis. You had agitation in the prisons and the creation of the Healing Lodge for Women. So there's a lot of attention to Indigenous issues, and government was initiating programs and projects to help address the what is recognized as decades, centuries perhaps, um, of abuse, of oppression, of systemic and overt oppression of Indigenous peoples, and in particular Indigenous women. But with the launch of the National Aboriginal Day was to create a new message for Canada, for us to learn to embrace uh, the strength of Indigenous peoples. So grandfather was invited to that, but actually it was his daughter Evelyn, Commander Dewashi, who went there. And she decided that um, she didn't want to stand up on the big platform that Governor General Romeo LeBlanc, that old man, she said, was a very nice old man, she said, was creating there. She said, wow, y'all have a beautiful garden. We should all go and hold hands in a circle in the garden. Uh, I don't want to stand above all the other elders in this group, in this gathering. And so, yes, it was Evelyn who did the first prayer for National Aboriginal Day back there in 1996. She did it the year after as well, I believe. Uh, I myself was working in Aboriginal justice at that time for the Department of Justice. And the Learning Network, the Aboriginal Justice Learning Network, uh, also attended that event. I didn't know Evelyn or grandfather at that time. Um, Madonna Marshall was with me, Frida Ahrens, grandmother Myrtle Thomas from Peguis Reserve, most wonderful old grandmother. She's no longer with us. Susan Swan, a former police woman. Rod Carlton did a lot of our documentaries back in the day. Uh, Actually, I should mention that. Let me go back. Rod Carlton worked as communications officer. He came to join us from Winnipeg, and he created the Donald Marshall Jr. Cultural Camp documentary, most powerful one even to this day. And we need to go back to that to learn how to reach kids and how to uh, find better ways of providing child and youth care services. My sister Zeni in South Africa is a passionate child and youth care worker. We've linked with her in some of her work, Circle of All Nations, and she's introduced this safe parks concept, and it's really, really quite amazing. But in many respects, Donald Marshall's camp at Malagawash was really the first safe park. And Jamie, you and Amanda were like that because you guys are into the forest schools. So also with our friend Martin, sent us many photographs of taking kids into the rocky landscapes in Massachusetts. Okay. Oh gosh, Sunbow 5 walk. Okay. Um, I don't know um, whether I see any evidence of Stephen McFadden around, and if not, just a second, please, people. Um, um, I just sent him a message. Just excuse me for. Oh, I know what I shall do. I shall have. Oh, I can't do both things at the same time. Okay, so 25 years ago, Grandfather Commander served as spiritual guide for a walk for Mother Earth across the continent from Cape Cod to Santa Barbara, California. At our last meeting in May, Stephen McFadden, who wrote a book on the fire of the eighth fire, the Odyssey of the Eighth Fire, shared with us a little bit about it. And I hope I'm going to still be able to get him online to talk a little bit about it. He was going to look to see whether any of the other walkers might want to join us. But I want to just say that the idea was born on Evelyn Commander's kitchen table, where Tom Dostow, who mapped out the direction of the walk, and Evelyn and others discussed with passion this opportunity to raise awareness about Indigenous issues. And grandfather said, yes, let's do it. And that was the number 5 walk. Now, um, our new student Himani joined us on the 22nd when we did our first live gathering, and she, in researching some of William Commander's work, was quite taken by the walk and has prepared for us a commemorative poster. And so I'm going to be asking her to read the text for us while I see if I can find Stephen McFadden. Stephen, if you're on, please send me a message on our online post so that I can, video call you or something like that. Okay, here there's Tom and grandfather and Claude, and then we went to Santa Fe, New Mexico, and grandfather Stephen McFadden took grandfather to this place where he bought his hat, his famous hat. He bought me one, and I used to joke. Not only did he buy me one, but then he insisted I should wear it. Okay, so here is the poster that Himani has created about the Samba 5 walk. Now, Himani, I am going to come and find you. Let me see. Be ready for me. Bear with me a minute, people. Oh, why don't I see your call-in? Here we go. Hello.
Hi, Romola.
How you doing?
Doing well, you?
Doing very well. Now let us just make sure we are showing you properly. Maybe if I just make it big, then do you think folk will be seeing us?
Yes, it's just lagging a little, but they should see us just fine now. Yes, there we go.
Okay. Well, thank you very much for doing that chunk of research, for pulling together that really creative poster, and I must say I'm very impressed with how you captured so many of the key elements in a very huge, complex event that is still unfolding to many of us. So, would you
Mhm.
please read what you've written, because it's in such tiny script on my page now.
Yes, yes. On the PowerPoint, it's quite small compared to the entire poster, but definitely I can read it out. I put together a commemorative poster for the 25th anniversary of the journey. And I'll start off with actually saying one of the quotes that Grandfather Commanda had made near the beginning of the journey. When someone had asked him about how he was telling people about why they needed the walk. He was in a meeting, or in the early days of the journey, at a big meeting in Canada with several chiefs of different nations. And when asked, he told them, I told them that it was time. I told them to look around the world at the floods, the earthquakes, the unexplained diseases, the hatred, and all of that. I told them it was time to walk. And I thought that simple quote really explains about why they need the walk, why they put it together. Now, just a bit about the walk itself. It was a spiritual pilgrimage that went from east to west on Turtle Island, which is what we now call North America. And the purpose of it was to re-energize a land that had witnessed bloodshed and to awaken the eighth fire, which is consistent with the seven fires prophecy that was presented in the 1400s wampum belts that Grandfather Commanda had carried. The walk had first started in First Encounter Beach on the Atlantic coast and then traveled west. And among the Anishinaabe, there's 7 prophets that each shared messages about the future. The 7th prophet had spoken about people having to face a choice of 2 paths. And this was interpreted as being that of materialism and spirituality, which we currently face globally. So, should we choose the path of spirituality and respect, this would ignite the 8th fire, which would then prelude an era that would revolve around forgiveness and caring. Now, in the 1990s, in the early portion, during the 7th fire, Grandfather Commanda saw this as an opportunity to kindle the 8th fire. Now, so for the 225 days that actually spanned the walk, and this started in June of 1995 and spanned all the way into 1996, we had a large group that was multiracial, that was multi-spiritual, that spanned between 7 people to over 200 walkers at some of its largest points. That journeyed from, as I mentioned, First Encounter Beach in Cape Cod, Massachusetts, and then went all the way to the Western Gate at Point Conception, which is near Santa Barbara in California. And Thumbadoo, which Romola had pointed out in one of the earlier photos, plotted that route. The word sunbow in the title actually refers to a natural phenomena of the full rainbow circle that appears around a sun. It's not very common, but it's also seen as a symbol of hope. So that was one of the parts of the title. And whereas the number 5 actually refers to the 5 colors of human beings. So yellow, red, black, white, and brown. In addition to that, we also had Naoki Hitomi, who had photographed a cloud feather of hope in the sky. So together, these sort of came together, and later, once we actually show the full poster, on the top right, you'll see the main logo of the Sunbow 5 walk. There were a few events that actually led up to the walk. One of them being the UN Conference of Indigenous Peoples in 1993, also called the Cry of the Earth. Grandfather Commanda had led a small Algonquin delegation alongside 6 other Native American groups to that conference. However, when Grandfather saw the lack of understanding of the united message that was presented, he sort of saw it as a sign that he needed to reach out to the people directly, not just to the leaders of the world, but just to everyone, everyone in general. So there was that. And another major signal he saw was that in 1994, August, which was about 9 months after the UN conference, there was another sign that sort of led to that, which was the birth of a white buffalo calf. And Romola might speak to this later, but
my computer, yeah.
That was also seen as another symbol of the sort of the chaotic and the confused nature of the era. So there are these two main events that also really pushed for the walk, and then you also had some other symbols and visions that were
speaking, so
that other individuals had that also made them even more interested in increase the urgency for the Sunbelt 5 walk. So this pilgrimage was not short by any means. It was about 3,700 miles, and we had people from all walks of life and that joined for different lengths of time. The group passed through several places of conflict, including the Pequot Massacre, which is the first Indigenous war in North America, passed through the Trail of Tears, Martin Luther King's assassination location, and it also passed through several sites of intense environmental degradation, such as the Acushnet River with toxic substances like PCBs and Mount Taylor's uranium mine. And at each of these locations, ceremonies and prayers have been held to bless the land, the water bodies, the living beings, but also praying for forgiveness. You also had individuals, First Nation tribes, environmental and religious and social justice groups who had met with the walkers along the way to share their stories, their history, and their teachings. And as was foreseen by grandfather in a vision that he sketched at the beginning of the walk, there were tensions that had arose in the form of the leadership, gender equality, and high physical and emotional stress that was going on throughout the walk. This had eventually led to three factions that had struggled to both dominate and unite. For many of the walk remains really an evolving journey, as Romola had mentioned earlier. And the spiritual pilgrimage had concluded in Santa Barbara, the site of one of the most notorious missions, and grandfather's daughter, Evelyn Dowich, and the Chumash leader, Liz Dominguez, immersed the Seven Fires proxy wampum belt in the Pacific Ocean. And the walk resulted in what we could see as increased communication, awareness, and also respect for Mother Earth and all living beings. It also spawned many other walks globally for years to come, as well as the next Commanda influential activities, his annual spiritual gatherings that would occur at his home at the Bixby Lake between 1996 and 2011. So all that being said, a lot of this comes from, as mentioned, Stephen McFadden's Odyssey of the Eighth Fire, which is an e-journal that is online. So there is a lot. There's 225 days of journal entries that he's written in great detail about what he experienced and saw as someone who's part of the time on the walk with them, and then also from a distance, which some of you may be interested in reading into, as well as some of these information also comes from William Commanda's archives, which Romola has put together. And there's one final quote I want to leave everyone with, and this was something that, which interestingly enough, this is a quote I read a couple of days after the George Floyd's death in the U.S. and the amount of protests that had come up. And at the time I was reading through this, through the journals, and something that struck me was the amount of tension. At that particular time, there was a lot of tension that had been arising. And grandfather had actually come down to join the walkers and to hold talks with everyone to see what could be done to unite everyone. And one of the quotes he had said at the time, "You must walk together and you must forgive and love each other. It is the only way that this walk can work. You must make a sacrifice. Even if someone has done something wrong, love them. You cannot cast them out of the circle. That is not the way." And this quote really struck me as something that not only just applies to the walk, but something that applies even today, decades later, when we talk about these times of racial tension, minority segregation, or other issues that we're currently facing, in that we can't, despite everything that has happened, or whoever is right or wrong, it is not about necessarily trying to figure out, which group to hold to blame, but about forgiving and loving. And I think that was something that grandfather really pushed for. And it was I thought that one key phrase that he had said really highlighted what the walk was about.
Okay. Well, thank you very much for that. Just hang on 1 second. Let me see who this might be. Excuse me. Hello.
Hi there. Sorry to interrupt you. I was actually a late.
I'm sorry, you're interrupting me. Sorry. Hi. Sorry. Excuse me. What I wanted to say was we talked last time about the Grandfather Commander's canoe video, and Valerie Poyen called it good enough for two. And when you picked on that quotation where grandfather says you must make a sacrifice, I used to always wonder about that phrase. He'd answer the phone, somebody would ask just like this, how are you doing? And I'd say, good enough for two. He'd say, good enough for two. And one day I thought, this is in fact what it is. He is being good enough for two. And so if we all try to be good enough for two, we rebalance some of that karmic pain that the George Floyd tragedies and countless others inflict upon us. Thank you so much for that. Now help me get rid of you carefully so I don't kill everything. How do we do this?
No worries. I'll close. I'll end the call. Thanks, Romola.
Okay, thank you so much. Take care. Bye. Okay. Hi. Somebody called me, and somebody called me from New York, but I can't manage calls as well as the agenda, and I have to really see where we're at. So, okay, so that was the PowerPoint, and you can explore that at greater depth later. So, yeah, so indeed we are living in times of prophecy. I'm wanting to race up a little bit because I have my friend from Manitoba who we should be calling into our conversation. And actually, the George Floyd story brings us right into that piece of work. But we're living in times of prophecy, and the North American Indigenous prophecy carriers, Wolf Project, Circle of All Nations, hosted gatherings in 1998 and 2000 to draw things together. I really can't do this. I'll just ignore it. Grandfather Commander initiates the annual June 21st pipe ceremonies at Victoria Island. The Hopi elder Martin Gashwa Sioma shares messages of the Hopi tablets, and Chief Arvel Looking Horse, who is the carrier of the white buffalo calf woman pipe, initiates the global June 21st Peace and Prayer Days. So this is how these Indigenous elders animated their work and their responsibilities over the last 2 decades. I'd like to add Grandfather Martin Martinez, the Navajo elder, to the list. He created a sacred cane, and that has also been a very special part of our work and our energizing. Okay, so now we're needing to move over to the other part of our story. And this is the activism of the Indigenous peoples. Here now, we're connected with the government of the North American Indian Nation, and we're dedicating this section to the memory of Jill Seavey. I said earlier, the imaginary behind this vision for Native presence and William Commander. You see, here's Jules CV. See, that's our grandfather, William Commander, in the picture. And it was in 1945 that this organization began to take its form. And it actually represents the roots of the civil rights activism in North America, and it started with the Indigenous. And that inspired the later anti-oppression movements that are still, sadly, a part of our reality. You know, Martin Luther King, oppression of women, multiple other fights for rights. In fact, the seeds in terms of the evolution eventually past apartheid in South Africa, etc. Mahatma Gandhi's efforts in India. Let us not forget what we have always forgotten, that really the Indigenous seeded this. And how can I be so sure that of this? You know, when the new United Nations was being established and Tocqueville was its first Secretary General, Joseph went to him and said, well, you know, what are the immigrants doing in our seats? Where is our place? And Tocqueville actually paid attention. He could see the logic in the argument of the Indigenous peoples at that early stage. Anyway, of course, he was questioning the presence of Canada and the United States in Turtle Island and the obliteration of the voice of Indigenous peoples. This work of North American Indian Nations government then served as a precursor to the Native Indian Brotherhood, which is now the Assembly of First Nations. But as constituted by these original players, you know, it was an organization that had place for the First Peoples, the people of mixed blood, and the newcomers who wished to be naturalized. So it was really a vision for Canada of unity, or North America of unity, really. And now we have a search for justice in a world on fire. So yes, in 1945, the roots of the activism included people like Jules Seaweed, Chief John Chabot from River Desert, William Commander, and the North American Indian Nations government, and of course, Chief Bernard Commander. There are many more we can talk about there, and there are stories too that we need to talk about in relation to that civil rights activism and struggle, but we'll get to that at another stage. To understand Grandfather William Commander's own thinking about Indigenous activism and rights, check out his own words on pages 144 to 149 of our thesis. So you will then be able to grasp the huge range and depth of his thinking. Okay, so in 2002, the University of Ottawa presents Grandfather Commander with its Inaugural Justice Award. So, and this was created by the Legal Studies Division of the University of Ottawa Community Legal Clinic. And they said they were asking whether he would be prepared to accept this honor, an honor of an Aboriginal individual who has made a substantial contribution to the advancement of Aboriginal law or justice for Aboriginal peoples. This is the first of what will become an annual event. And this year, the subcommittee of the Legal Studies Advisory Committee chose William Commander as the recipient. We feel that this is most appropriate based on your dedication to Aboriginal justice issues and your support of the work of the Aboriginal Legal Services Division of the clinic, along with the countless other worthy causes of the Aboriginal community that you have supported for many, many years. We'd be honored if you'd accept this award. And that was held, I think, in the fall of 2000. The invitation came from the spokesperson, Celeste McKay. And I tell you guys, I just found these just yesterday. So, you know, everything that I'm sharing with you, I think is rather amazing. Grandfather wanted this PowerPoint to be presented and he wanted all this information shared. So I'm going to read to you what I said because I was asked to talk about the impact William Commander had on my life. I said, I feel truly privileged. I felt truly privileged when Celeste and the organizing team asked me to say a few words on the impact Elder William Commander has had on my life. In one word, he has impacted profoundly. I left the old South African world of racism and injustice and came to Canada in 1970, and for over 25 years worked in the Canadian criminal justice system across the country and in many areas: halfway houses, maximum and minimum security prisons, parole, security programs, policy work, and I worked for over 15 years in Aboriginal corrections, policing, and justice. But after I met Elder William Commander, I began to really understand what justice was about. And so I quit my secure job with the federal government, and now I work for him. The hours are pretty tough since he never ceases to work. The hours are pretty tough since he never ceases to work, but the benefits are incredible. I feel now that my criminal justice system years were my apprenticeship for my real job as the eldest secretary and receptionist and policy advisor and writer and driver and bodyguard and sometimes hitman. Also, he likes taking me to his meetings as his political message. I'm the real Indian, not him. Three key thoughts come to my mind when I think of Elder Commander's work in justice. Over 30 years ago, he once said to Pierre Trudeau, as they parleyed au français, "You know, you spell that word justice wrong." "No, no," Mr. Trudeau replied. "That is how we spell it in English, Justice." "Oh," said William, "I thought it was Justus." Now, countless lawyers and Aboriginal justice advocates have used that phrase since, but very few have been able to transform just us into a vision of inclusion. William Commander has in his Circle of All Nations work. Every year he hosts an international gathering at his home at his own expense and assisted by his incredible team of volunteers, many of whom are the criminal justice system's offenders and parolees. He takes his healing work into the prisons, and the National Film Board documentary, or Jigwanong, focuses on the impact of his work on the inmates. One of these men was Inuit and could barely understand English. Next year, after the documentary was filmed, he came to the elders' gathering as part of a corrections work program and helped to build a lodge. The following year, he came alone, but still somewhat isolated by language barriers. But I noticed he volunteered to clean the toilets, and then I realized how profoundly he had been affected by the elder, and how much he felt a part of the Circle of All Nations, and how much he wanted to contribute to the effort. Elder Commander just turned 89 in 2002. He was born on the 11th of November, Remembrance Day, on the eve of the First World War. His mother named him Morning Star. To many of us, a Jigwanong is a symbol of light emerging out of darkness. He was born to remember the past of his ancestors in a singularly unique political and spiritual stance, as well as to forge a path into the future. He continues to work tirelessly to bring his vision for the Circle of All Nations, a culture of peace, forward to a new level in his vision for the establishment of a healing and peace-building center on Victoria Island, a center where Indigenous peoples can reclaim their heritage and heal and unify, and then share their wisdom and ideology of inclusion and justice and harmony with the rest of the world. As we stand on the brink of possibly a third world war, his vision is sorely needed by us all. It is no small honor to be supporting William Kamana in his work. And that, of course, 2002 was just post 2001. And the wars and the global warnings have just actually grown so much more dire. And so now, from the mass extinction of countless species, climate change, extreme weather, contagion, coronavirus, to now racism, unrestrained killing, and desperate need for global shift on multiple fronts. These are the challenges of our times, and predicted also by Evelyn DeWashi's grandpa, Charlie Smith, William's father-in-law, as the consequences of global injustice. Now I have to call in our friend Clayton Sandy. So if you're going to take a moment to look at this little slide with Clayton and Grandfather Commander, I am going to track our phone number and call Clayton. Really big.
Hello.
Hey Clayton, how are you?
Hi, how are you?
Well, running a little bit behind schedule, but you know how it goes.
Okay.
Oh gosh, I hope you'll get to see some of this someday. We've had a busy morning of it busy hour of it this past hour and a half,
Okay.
and we've talked about most recently. Oh well, we've talked about the solstice and the equinox and the special meaning of this particular day. We've talked about the Sunbow 5 walk that Grandfather guided across North America. We've talked about the creation of the North American Indian Nations government and the civil rights activism that William and his friends engaged in 1945. And we've just come now to this segment on racism and policing.
Okay.
And I have put out a slide on my Facebook page, which I think our public at large can be seeing now. And it's one of you and Grandfather Commander here in my living room. Must have been Christmas because we got lights on. It must have been the winter.
Okay.
And I say on the slide, we're talking now about racism, policing, and justice. And we have a special interview with the Circle of All Nation colleague, Clayton Sandy at Dakota, living in Winnipeg. And my key memories include the first time we met, which was at the 1994 RCMP Policing Conference. Then we both worked with a few other folk to create the first Aboriginal Policing Forum, which we hosted in Winnipeg. Was a 3-day conference, but Mother Nature decided everything should be in 4 days, so it snowed and we stayed there for an extra day. We were both involved in the Aboriginal Justice Learning Network from 1996 to 98. You also met and collaborated with our friend Donald Marshall Jr. We both, together with Junior, Marshall participated in a Salvation Army conference in Aurelia. Grandfather Commander and I came to join you, and you organized the first men's wellness conference. And we came to Manitoba many years ago, and Grandfather Commander brought his wampum bells to share with your friends. We did a Skype conference with you and your colleagues in Justice in Manitoba. And then you and I more recently participated in the Child and Youth Care Conference on Thunder Bay. And so over the years, we've done miscellaneous things in policing, justice, anti-racism, bridge building, child and youth care work. But more recently, I sent you that article about the bastard cop. And I'm going to turn it over to you, but we were both wondering why we worked so hard over so many decades, and you haven't heard about all your grandfather's work, and why we, struggle to see such little improvement. But I'm not going to forecast whatever you might want to say. I'm just going to feed you loud into our public stream.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay.
Yeah, go right ahead and yeah, share what you like.
Okay, thank you, Romola. First of all, happy National Aboriginal Day to everybody out there, and also to happy Father's Day to all the fathers across the country and the fathers who can't be fathers today. Hope that someday you can be a good father, but I want to wish you a Father's Day also too. It's really delightful to be joining you, Romola. It's been many years since we've been on this journey together of a number of different events that we've done together. I think probably the most meaningful one for me was probably around maybe in the middle 90s when we held a justice conference here. And I think it was the judges that time, or crown attorneys, I think, and we had this event at downtown Winnipeg. I think it was at the Radisson, and there was quite a few people in attendance. But I always remember one thing that really struck me is we did something in the evening, and we had a guest speaker come in that time, and he talked about his own life story. He talked about his own struggles, and he talked about his struggles growing up in poverty and all that kind of stuff. And I remember the guests, some of the guests that were there, some of the judges after the event came over and spoke to him and I, just talked about our experience. And I think a lot of times when we share our stories, a lot of times people don't seem to understand the struggles that happen, every day to our people. And some of the struggles that I talk about sometimes, and some of the people that I connect with, are struggles from probably 50 years ago, 60 years ago. And it just baffles me that we still have those stories going on today, and how we continue to move on the uphill battle to get people to acknowledge our stories and to support them somehow. And I remember, I think it was 2006. I took a 2-year secondment to work in the Stony Mountain Federal Prison here in Manitoba. And when I went for the interview, along with the warden, they asked me what kind of a difference I could make in the institution in 2 years, and what kind of difference I made with gang members. And my response was, if I can change one of these men, maybe I can make a big difference in his life or the family that he might have in the future. And that's the only thing I can contribute now, is basically changing one person's life. And I don't think I was going to make massive changes within the institution, but I think it's just one person at a time. And on my journey, that's what I've seen, is just basically changing one person at a time. And we all have our struggles, and I think we all know what's the best thing to do. But many times we don't have those opportunities and those supports to help us get on that right road. So I found that I've often found that, especially the elders that you connected me to in the 90s that were at the national level, I met so many beautiful elders and that had shared information with me and just treated me so nice. And those things were probably some of the best moments for me. Was basically the way I was treated amongst our own people and our own colleagues. And in the end, we're working in a system that had all kind of invisible barriers. And a lot of those barriers basically just didn't continue on with the work we're doing. But anyway, so we keep on moving forward, and love the work that we're always doing. And I like the fact that we're making believers out of some people. So a lot of times it's a time that we have to keep on moving forward, educating people, and just kind of, pull up our socks, and it doesn't matter what we're going through, but we keep on moving forward. And you and I have always, we've always made interactions with people that are just getting off their healing journey. And a big part of that is basically we're all on the healing journey. And I believe non-Native people are on this healing journey also too. And it's a time for them to open up their minds and their hearts and to accept what we're talking about and then acknowledge it and move forward and help us in some way possible. So this sort of some of my happy moments. And I remember one time I was actually placed and Father Commander, he showed us a video of him constructing. Well, he wasn't constructing the canoe, but he was showing some people from a different country how to make a canoe. And one thing I liked about the video and William himself was he always had a really a good sense of humor right up to the end. And I used to phone him off and on just to chat, but I've always liked his sense of humor. And he always made me laugh all the time, and he used that humor all the time just on his teachings also too. And same thing with Donald Marshall. I found him to be such a humble man. Because when I first met him the first time at one of the conferences, and he spoke there, he actually reminded me of a friend that I had growing up here in Winnipeg. That was actually in jail also too. But that's who he reminded me of. So, but we've had a great journey, and we still got a long ways to go. I think about when I was in grade 1, I think, or whatever, and even when I was in foster care, the racism that I faced, and when I was just young, and even today we still face the same racism. But I'm glad people are finally talking about about racism, and it always seems to take the death of one person for people to start making change. So I'm hoping that this the issue with George Floyd continues on and it drips into Canada, because we're having the same issues going on in the States as we do have here in regards to policing and racism is so hard to attack sometimes. I guess maybe one of my final thoughts is that I've often thought, and I work with a lot of police forces in my journey, is that and people that I've talked to who are either work in RCMP, Winnipeg Police, they've always talked about having their grandfathers or great grandfathers were police officers, their grandfathers, their fathers, their uncles, their cousins, and I keep on thinking that if that continues on, how do other family members get to be in the police force if that happens all the time? When do we break that cycle of one family sort of in control? So until the system opens that up and we basically stop that preventing family after family after family joining the service, I don't think a lot will change. So we need to do something in the hiring practice of letting other people in the system and breaking down that family. Because if a family continues on, the same things will happen. And I believe that's why things happen the same way, because we're just talking to the same people, but a different generation, and the same attitudes that continue on. So that's my feeling about that. And but what we can do, I have children, I have grandchildren, and I see the beauty in them in regards to handling racist attitudes and being able to move forward and being proud of who they are and what they have to contribute. So those are sort of my ideas and my thinking and my thoughts. But it's been a great honor, working with you, and I'll continue working with you and whoever who wants to move forward. But our friendship has been very strong, and we seem to think alike. And I've always loved the fact that I can pick up the phone and we can have an hour conversation just on our ideas and our frustrations, and then move forward on issues. But I wish everybody a happy National Aboriginal Day, and again to the fathers and to everybody. But it's an important day, and it's an important time for people to look at change and to accept that change and to open up their minds and their hearts and let other people in. And that's what I enjoy the most, Romola, is the time that we've spent together and all the things we've done. And we've made a lot of believers of a lot of people also too. And that's what it takes, is basically extending your hand and accepting somebody And then basically, if that person, is receptive to that, then basically that's a good starting point. And that's a big part of it. Just change is basically in getting a starting point, making people feel comfortable. The work that I'm doing with Circles for Reconciliation, that's exactly what we're doing. Is basically, providing a place for people to sit with us in a circle and to feel comfortable to ask questions, to see their stories that we have to share. And many of the stories are very heartbreaking stories, but it's a sign that people are prepared to talk the truth. And that's part of it, is standing in your truth and not being afraid. But again, many of our people haven't got that ability to do that, and just haven't got the strength sometimes. It takes people like myself and thousands of other Indigenous men and women out there that are prepared to share their stories now. And they start to create this big wave across the country that everybody needs to either get on and support somehow. So those are my thoughts, Romola, and thank you for calling me today, and thank you for having me on today. It's been a great pleasure to be on this journey with you. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Peyton. Indeed, it's been an honor and great learning experience for me as well. Yeah, gosh, that's quite a long time that we've maintained this long distance relationship, and I guess managed to still stir up a spirit of hope, despite so many things that have disappointed and continue to disappoint us at very deep levels. Yeah, no, it's really great. Thank you for sharing. I'm glad you mentioned these circles of reconciliation. As I mentioned to some of your colleagues, I think that kind of idea of drawing together native and non-native people to explore some of the issues that create barriers might be of particular value in the national capital city kind of environment, in government when things shake back into normal, in universities and schools. Today in our session, we have, I know actually, Clayton, that you worked so hard with the Manitoba Youth Role Model Program all those years ago, inspiring youth through, gosh, so many different activities to engage in transforming their own future. And I know we're also extremely disheartened and heart lost, really, when we see some of the challenges that those very same young people have to meet every time in making one step forward. But today, I'm pleased to say that I'm able to put on this activity today because of two new students at Carleton. Well, three really. I haven't mentioned our other chum, Said Khan, who is going through grandfather's archives and did a summary of his chronology of activities up to year 2003. And that's already up on our Facebook post. But the other person who's been so helpful, other than Hermione, who talked about the Summer 5 walk and her paper, is April, who's helped us pull together our technology to do this wonderful online gathering. And so, yeah, your focus on young people and both teaching and sharing and learning from them and inspiring them, it's so critically important to create the future. And I hope you and I will at some stage return to some of the child and youth care work we were discussing with Zeni. I was likening it to Donald Marshall's Safe Camp, the one in his documentary. And of course, it's much like much of the work you try to do on the land with people. Yeah, so let's hope a new horizon is coming. So thank you very much for joining us on this special Sunday. And we'll catch up again.
For sure. Thank you very much.
Okay, bye.
Okay, bye.
Bye. So, yeah, so why I was looking frantically, oh yeah, I put it in the wrong place. Okay, excuse me, people. So I took this photograph of the prize that grandfather received when he got the Justice Award from University of Ottawa. And if you notice, This little Inuit sculpture has the bear standing on one foot. The other foot is raised, looking for balance. And he's on my photographs of beaver cabins at Bitterby Lake. And unfortunately, too many beaver cabins are no longer with us, too. So we need to rebalance not only for people, but also for creatures. This is what I was looking for earlier. This was the text of my speech, and I re-sort my slides so that they appear in the right place. So then, as Clayton says, we're always looking for hope and opportunities and ways out of the many challenges we have. Grandfather developed a vision for Victoria Island, and what would you know, right? I wasn't really going to engage too much on this subject, and in fact, I am not. But I did find papers about the. You can't see me really anymore. Let me put myself forward. On the Indigenous Center. But more than that, I wanted to show you these letters that I just found, dated February 19, 2009. And one of them was to Honorable late Paul Dewar, was very much a supporter of the vision for the Indigenous Center, and worked hard to get that in front of people in Parliament. Also a letter to then MP Justin Trudeau, and we wrote also to the conservative leadership at the time. And really, we really believe that vision is beyond the domain of any one party. It's something that we hope at some point all folk will embrace. We are embracing it via this, our virtual effort. And I wanted to share this one. So in Grandfather Ho animated his work through many paddle for peace events at Chaudière Victoria Island to show the integration of peace and environment and relationship building. And here's a picture of Daniel Beauchamp, who traveled for many months on a canoe and arrived on 1 June 21st at Victoria Island. His prayer for healing and his prayer for grandfather's work. Between 2012 and 2020, there was much suppression, entropy, energy loss, syntropy, stirring up of the energies of Grandfather Commander's work, and I call it at the Pandora's box of Chaudière, where many things were released, and it has in fact been super challenging. But what was left in the Pandora's box after all the magic disappeared in the real mythology was hope. And hope springs eternal for us in the circle of all nations. And so I call our Asanabka our virtual academy, ours virtual academy, Asanabka's virtual academy. And here we're hoping to see further bridging between Indigenous, grassroots, and institutions and academy. And now I'm hoping to have a special interview with a Circle of All Nations colleague who, Dr. Balkaman Taib, who is in Nigeria, but who was here with us in North America, Canada, Quebec, did his PhD studies in New Zealand, is a guy who knows the swims with the turtles, digs the land, and I'm going to see if I can just find him on Facebook. So give me a moment. And I hope our timing will work so that I can get him. Oh, there's no answer. Apparently, this is the time when things get busy. On his circuit. So I'll try again when I'm finished the rest of our presentation. Maybe we'll get him on for a few minutes. So he's an educator. He studies education. He's an activist. He challenges colonial mindsets, challenges the structures that continue to constrain our lives and the ways of moving forward for many people. He did an amazing documentary one time of his grandfather's land in Nigeria. And it talks of the angst of many of us, really, here in Canada, who belong to other homelands, who search for a rootedness and search for a sense of belonging. And most of us are so grateful that Grandfather Commander opened his arms and offered us such a sense of belonging. Let me try it once more. Yeah. I don't think that's working, so let it be for now. And maybe one day we'll have a PowerPoint conversation around education. Okay, so I wanted now then to turn to the core principles of the Circle of All Nations as identified in our Learning from a Kindergarten Dropout book from 2005. Here we talk about a spiritual, not to be confused with a religious, foundation, which we consider integral to the way of life. This is the way of life that Grandfather Commander tried to inspire in us. And I suppose he demonstrated it by putting all these key pieces of paper into my hands at this precise moment, so that you will, in fact, realize his history, his past, are very much projected for being a part of an ongoing spiritual thread in life. The medicine wheel we discuss as a conceptual tool to access complexity. And we've developed our Circle of All Nations medicine wheel iconology. We did that, in the late 90s. And we see that it has, in fact, influenced many animations of conceptualization. Ours follows the threads of thinking of grandfather and indigenous peoples. And also there are mandalas, there are other reflections of this kind of power in such a tool to help us understand really big issues. And with our Circle of All Nations medicine wheel motional process, we find endlessly opportunities. Oh, okay, to come in. Now let me. Oh my gosh. Answer. Hello. Hey.
Hello, Romola.
Hello. How are you? Very good. I think you're on live. There you are. And we've been on Facebook all afternoon, and I have to turn my fan off so you can see I'm sweating just about as hot as you must be in your garden.
Yeah, well, it's actually it's a bit better now. It's a bit better now, but the day was awful. I couldn't go out today.
No, eh?
It's too much. It's like we're going to the plus 40 Celsius, and it's gonna go up now.
Okay. Wow. Yeah, well, you're looking good. How long have you been back there now? A few months?
Since March.
Since March. Okay.
Yes.
And
yes, lots of work to do on the house.
Okay. Um,
I can show you around if you want to see.
that'll be wonderful.
Great.
Tell people where you are. Tell people where you're located.
Okay, everyone, you are in Kabylie, which is a Berber, North African indigenous region in Algeria.
Okay.
And so I'm located like probably 2-3 hours drive from here to the Mediterranean Sea.
Wow.
And just at the bottom of the highest peaks of Algeria, the Atlas Mountains.
Okay. Okay.
We call them Jorjora.
What does that mean?
Wow, it's just the name of the mountains. I couldn't tell you exactly.
I think I remember when you were creating videos in the days before people created videos, you showed grandfather some of that landscape.
Exactly,
Yeah.
exactly. Yeah, I went up and I was super happy to show and share. Yeah, you were there as well, eh?
Yeah.
We were watching the video I made on my mountains. Yes.
Yeah.
Ah,
Okay.
good memories.
Yes. So tell us a little bit. You were here in Quebec
Yes.
years ago, 2 decades, 20, 30 years ago. You came to our gatherings in the 90s.
Yes, okay. Yeah, sorry. So I used to live, I'm just trying to connect my headphones here.
Okay.
Okay. Yes. So, I used to live in the reservation in the north of Quebec.
Yes.
And so that's how I met Grandfather William, because we used to, I used to come over with Lucien Saint-Onge, the Saint-Onge family
Yes.
from Innu Nation.
Yes, the grandmother and all her children used to come to our gatherings. I was mentioning, yeah.
And I was also translating during the ceremonies for Grandfather Robin and Grandmother Kathleen.
Okay.
Robin Green, yeah, Ojibwe from Kenora.
And my last guest from Manitoba used to know Kathleen in the old days. Such a small world. Carry on.
Oh, yeah. Yes. So that's how I ended up meeting you and Grandfather, who used to call me Big Man.
Okay. Yes.
Yeah. So basically, that's how I got introduced. And I'm a teacher, so I taught in Maliotenam, so which is the name of the reservation. I taught in Maliotenam, and before in my home actually. Yeah, that's where I had a lot of my spiritual growth happening.
Okay.
Yeah.
And then you were a student at McGill.
Yes, I did my master's degree actually. After teaching in the reservation, I just realized that the school system was actually destroying nations. You know.
Okay.
It was creating alienation. It was creating. I don't know if it's probably worse in Quebec than it is in the rest of Canada, even if the rest of Canada is not a very good situation. But there is basically, it's like huge Western hegemony happening. There is not much happening in terms of Indigenous language, Indigenous culture. So basically, it kind of pushes kids to drop out. It's not addressing social situations as well, So it's like teaching in another language and forcing the kids to succeed in a language that is not theirs, eh?
Right.
So I reflected on that, and after witnessing things like teaching after that, and I needed time and space to figure out, what was bothering me after that experience, right?
Uh-huh.
And I went to see Grandfather at that time.
Okay.
I had to beg him, and I said, I need to go on a journey. I've been working my whole life since I'm 9 years old. I've been working. I need to take some time off to reflect on all that. And so I brought him tobacco, and I said, after I worked so much, and all I know is work. Now I need to take time to go on some kind of a quest, some kind of a try to take a break to find myself and,
Mm-hmm.
and reflect on my experiences. So I gave him tobacco and he said, go ahead, and he listened to me. And on my way back from visiting him, in Maniwaki, in Kidiganzibi, that's when I bought the ticket. So I didn't have the courage, He gave me the strength to actually jump.
Okay.
And me the strength to jump, and it was a life-changing experience.
Wow.
It became like that's how I ended up writing my pedigree with McGill, education as a healing process.
Okay.
Then I reconnected with my own people as well back home and wrote my PhD. I was in a Maori research center in New Zealand.
Yes.
So I became a student in New Zealand as well. And it was all part of that journey that I took after meeting with him. Was a life-changing thing. I met many people and it generated a lot of healing energy. And I ended up, in New Zealand. So, so many things happened. It was like were challenging as well. So when I had a little bit of pain, I would go see him and say, why are people like that?
Yeah. Well, fortunately, you were able to swim with the turtle, so you had some balance.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. No, I went diving and I had so many good things happened during that time. Really, I went and it was super important because reconnecting with my land, reconnecting with my people has allowed me to take care of my dad who was sick. I buried him. He's here. He's buried here on the land. I went back. I was here for him. And all those major, super important things. That's after I brought him to Meko.
Wow. Special.
So yeah. So I'm super grateful. Yeah.
Well, that's the theme of our gathering in May and also our gathering now, the journey. The journey just carries on. It continues if you have embraced something deeply with in our case, with grandfather. He
Mm-hmm.
sparks us off and we keep on growing and learning. Yeah.
Yeah, and this is something that has been, it's just, I design as well, it's just really, what I was always amazed, is like the simplicity for him, like spirituality is not something fashionable. It's just something that is part of everyday life, He will like take out his sage and start smudging or smoke his pipe or just listen to you, And he told me once, he said, all those things, the pipe, the lodge, all these things that we use are here to help us. But spirituality is in everything. So if you connected, spirituality is in everything. And this,
Mm-hmm.
So and that's why, like talking to him was like, you didn't have to have a big ceremony. You just share with him.
Yeah. Yeah. Somebody was talking about his sense of humor as well. And
Mm-hmm.
Somewhere else I was saying, I say he's just the DC elder, the direct connect elder. And it's just, I say, for all that I consider him like, one of the holiest men, it was also like the most humble, no ritual, no, not too much, was like just, now's the time to roll up the hose. Now's the time to mow the garden. Now's the time to get blades for the windshield wipers. Things like that. Practical, and yet so much of big work happened.
But I think that's, to me, it's a great teaching, That's the real meaning of resilience.
Yes.
That's the real meaning of resilience. You know, you don't claim to be an indigenous if you don't live like one.
Yes. Yes.
You know, he was telling me one day about, he was telling me about one person who considered himself like a spiritual leader. And he said, you can't empty the ocean and at the same time claim that you're saving the earth.
Challenges, lots of, yeah. And so it's interesting you mention all of that, and I've included it in the text of this PowerPoint. But when I, just by chance, I wasn't actually even looking for anything, and I found these papers, and it included our prayer for the day, because it was a prayer to the Great Spirit, who's sort of let me learn the lessons you are hiding under every rock and leaf. It was like let me hear the voice in the wind. That kind of message. And so that's what I did for our opening prayer, because I say sometimes it's a challenge for me when I do these indigenous linked events, even though grandfather was so much circle and bridge building, to explain how the spirit was part of everything, and that could include the smudge, and that could include the pipe, and that could include a text like this. But it's difficult for me to ask somebody to come and pray for a grandfather event when they're not organically a part of it. And likewise, even with presentations and things like that, it's only people who kind of like present themselves and are engaged that become part of whoever shares stories at our events. I don't go and say, oh, there's an expert in such and such. We need them. Though actually, I must say, there are a few now that I think we do need. And my last friend we're talking about all that police racism and all that heavy duty stuff. And I noticed there was a very interesting article by Confessions of a Bastard Cop. There was another one, I used to be a skinhead, and this guy's now become a lawyer somewhere in BC. And then today, somebody shared a post, a policeman, Indian like me, who actually comes from South Africa, dealt with that kind of racism. Now he's working in Lanark County here in Ontario, hoping to clean them up. And I was saying that place has been pretty racist in that area, not only white folk towards Indigenous, but enough people who look like me have been kind of racist with Indigenous. But the cops from that area several years ago came to visit grandfather, and they presented me with this little mascot. I mean, I never or ever knew whether they planted something to record everything I say, or whether this is a cuddly little bear for me to go to sleep with. But that's why I always hear whatever I feel everybody ought to be thinking about in order to create a bridge into the future. Now, tell me just a little bit about what research, what work, what book you're working on, and then I think we're getting close to our closing hour.
Yeah, okay. Well, just to comment on what you just said, like the sharing. I think the answer to hatred is not hatred, and that's definitely it's definitely something that is important to keep in mind. Racism is everywhere. Like just a comment on this to share personal narrative. It's like something I experienced myself this year. I was working in the north as a school principal. I was hired to do so, and when I was sitting on committee, my superintendent told us, "Nah, probably good to raise camel, and I should shut up." And it was like public during professional meetings. I complained about that, and I ended up losing my job.
Really, eh?
So like these are situations that are happening all the time. Does that mean that everyone. No. I'm aware that this sickness exists.
Yeah.
I'm tired to have to deal with it, But I find ways, to transcend this and bring healing again, And that's comes through what I'm writing at the moment, the chapters.
Okay.
It's about cultural leadership. So now I'm writing 2 book chapters. One is about Indigenous cultural leadership, research methodologies.
Okay.
How do you do research that are culturally appropriate? If we could say that.
Right.
And it's always it's a. I don't want to start a big academic thing. No, basically, my research is about that. My research is about trying to find ways to communicate within the system. At the moment, education is whitening.
Right.
Is creating producing machine and consumerists. It's not happening in cultures. It's not happening in languages. Creating more and more hegemony,
Right.
and it's imperialistic. It's a complete imperialistic tool, So my understanding is like we have to work towards harmony. So there's 2 forces here, and I call that in Berber culture we have what we call Nia and what we call Nif. Nia is the strength to reach out, to support, and to be supported.
Okay.
It's a form of humility, and if it's the strength to stand up for your rights, stand up and face the odds. So you can't only be a warrior fighting and wanting to fight everyone. You also need to have your heart and reach out and ask for support and accept the teachings when they break the ego, it's a part of it. So Nia and Nif, create some kind of a balance. And if you go too much on one side or too much on the other one, like if you have too much Nia, you're just going to be stepped over. And if you have too much Nif, you're going to be a pain in the ass. Sorry.
No, that's a very huge point you make, and it's one I struggle with all the time. Partly, I suppose, first in relation to being immersed in Indigenous work for so long, I always felt I had to make up for South Africa, for having a life here, and so I think even with my work with grandfather, I accommodated a lot more questionable stuff, and he would have probably closed the door and moved on. And so your distinction between those 2 kinds, because he would say, yes, we have to love, we have to forgive, and in fact we also had a discussion about this earlier, but he'd also say the truth has to be told. So it was not a pushover in relation to that. And of course, with all the black violence, over the last few weeks in the States, I've been thinking a lot more about my South African original background and my, extended family across the state, who include Black people, who are dealing with things. And I feel like, yeah, we all need to be moving on to the next range of interaction and ideas and sharing and taking responsibility. And so, yeah, I'm really glad to hear about your research and stuff like that. When I did grandfather's teachings, I struggled, of course, a lot because I didn't know what it meant to be going to school, let alone anything else. But when I finally figured out doing my methodology, I went into my thesis with 4 different angles. And one external examiner was wondering why I had to use so many theoretical frameworks, And I felt like I had to, because on the one hand, I wanted to present, the kind of ideological foundations that comes from William's language and the earth. I wanted to present the historical narrative in terms of the racism, the challenges that he was not naive about. And I wanted then to present my voice, because how was I hearing and responding to it? And then
Yeah.
finally, I wanted to show, where do we move on? Am I researching somebody who's dead and over with? But with what you talk about is he's still relevant and live. And that is the fourth part of my research. And in fact, so it is very good to finish off on this note, really, because what I'm doing with this online presentation is trying to bridge between Indigenous, grassroots, between the institutions, the policing, the bureaucracy, the churches, all those institutional structures, as well as the academy. And somewhere we have to get a better handle on finding a way forward. And so I think I'd be very interested to learn more about your research, because I think that's a good thread to continue the journey, and maybe we'll write something together.
Inshallah, hopefully, God's will.
Okay. Okay, thank you so much for joining us. And we'll
Love you.
love you. We'll talk to you again. Bye-bye.
Yes, thank you. Welcome again in Algeria.
Hey, and I still have, with honor, those special earrings.
Oh, beautiful. Beautiful. Thank you.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
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 Okay. Well, guys, that was very special. I hope you're all still here with me, but we're coming really pretty well to the close. Gosh, in our last few weeks, we've gone to Taiwan, we've gone to China, we've gone to the States, we've gone to Algeria. Oh, this is lovely. Okay, so I think I was interrupted when I was talking about our values. Of course, the relational value, which operates at all levels, multiple levels, including this cyber level of communicating across the country. We talk in our book about the distinction between individuality and the individualism. Okay, and I think this is something that, like many of us, need to spend a lot of time reflecting on. When we talk about the individuality as being reflective of a person who realizes, in a garden, it might be the daisy, might be the oak tree, it might be the rose with the thorns, might be the cedar bush. The job is to become the best cedar bush, become the best daisy, become the best, in order to contribute to the tapestry of the garden. And the garden is always changing. It's a live, creative thing, so it grows. But not everybody can be the oak tree. Not everybody can be the rose. So really, we have to spend a lot of time figuring out our own individual strengths, limitations, and maximize our potential. And also, because we happen to live in a social structure, in a biodiverse culture, we need to see how we fit in with everybody else. And that includes the rocks, and that includes the polar bear and the squirrels. With the notion of individualism, that's been like a huge thing in North America, where the entire ideology has been grounded in the rights of the individual. And the rights of the individual supersede the rights of the community. And so a lot of us, even as we proclaim we're doing noble things, we have to look to see how much we're wanting to position our way. We've got to really do a lot more reflection on that notion of individualism, because it's been ground into us and it needs to be exfoliated. I want to also go now to the idea that the individual and the community are inextricably interconnected. And finally, that conflict is negotiated with responsibility, with respect, and with generosity to access harmony and balance. So again, conflict is negotiated with responsibility, respect, and generosity to access harmony and balance. So the journey continues, and we had promised you that we were going to have Lucan do a presentation, but we will probably be doing that at some other point because it's been a bit of a challenge. But I want to tell you what this presentation will be about, and it'll be about the American eel. This is the nomad fish of North America, and in 2007, grandfather raised the cry for the plight of the ancient, very special eel, which traveled through his lands, through Quebec and Ontario. And basically, it's a fish that is spawned in the North Atlantic, travels up the St. Lawrence, comes to the Great Lakes, into the Ottawa River, and matures in the Quebec lakes, the Ontario lakes. 22 years later, once there's a mass of these eels, they sexually differentiate, and then they make their journey back to the Sargasso Sea in the North Atlantic to spawn and regenerate life. But their process of movement, much like the movement of Indigenous peoples confined to reserves, has also been confined and decimated by commodification of the eel skin, by dams that prevent their movement, etc. But Lucan has created out of that prayer for the eel her very special story where she talks about the life of the eel. And in her work over the years, she's also introduced Algonquin words from her studies with the elder White Duck and others. And she's presented her her story at several events. This one shows something that she did in Toronto. And here you see the huge creativity in the preparation for this festivity that then brings the spirit of the eels to the young people and helps teach them about conservation, about life, about species at risk, about balance, and all of those things. And for us, of course, about the fact that the journey continues. So we shall be looking forward to seeing Lucan's documentary at some other point. I'm hoping we'll be able to show it also at an Oceans Canada Partnership Development online conference. So in fact, we will still be making our efforts to draw together the grassroots and the academy and building new passion for knowledge, new ways of thinking, new knowledge for the future. Okay, and so finally, I say thank you very much for joining us this afternoon. I've presented you with some of our contact details over here. We're ever grateful to Karen Bisson, who has created and kept alive our Asanabka website over these many years. My Circle of All Nations platform went defunct, but there are two sites that hold all sorts of rich information still. We're looking to create a new Circle of All Nations website, so you'll be able to catch our ongoing conversations there. But in the meanwhile, even though the Circle site looks kind of old-fashioned, let me tell you, it's dense with very valid and relevant information. I've included here, partly because we're doing this link with Academy, the website of the Geomatics and Cartographic Research Center, where you can find some of the atlases that have been created by people. Actually, here's one for Stephanie. Stephanie Pine just launched her work on the residential school land memory mapping project. And so it's one of our newest atlases up on the GCRC website. Of course, you know how I like to claim everything. And I'm going to say right now that Circle of All Nations did a presentation with Stephanie on this work of hers at our last in-person gathering. That was our September 2019 equinox gathering. And so, yeah, congratulations on your work there, Stephanie. I've included the link to our thesis on Grandfather Commander. And with that, I'm going to say thank you all very much for joining me. I'm going to shut down the PowerPoint, but then I shall just go to the comments and questions and see if you have things you'd like to share. If people would like to talk now, then I can take a few minutes to have you share as well. So let's see what's happening there. Bye from this stage. Close that. Let me just minimize that. Nick. Oh my goodness. See, another guilty student is sending me a message, but we'll worry about that later. I'm a taskmaster, and yeah, folks. So Bob made other people. Bob, are you there still? Somebody enjoyed the talk with Belka. Tim Thompson says, thank you very much. Okay, you guys. Wow. I hope not. Something might have gone wrong with our video. I hope not. But anyway, you guys, well, thank you very much for joining us. And we'll see you all likely in August because we'll be remembering Grandfather Commander then. Take good care. Bye-bye.